Oh, thank God you're still alive. We need to rescue Ghislaine Maxwell before the Clintons get to her. She has a lot of important information. Let's go. Oh, we're too late, buddy. She committed suicide with a machine gun to the back of her head. Guess we'll never know the truth. The Stenzel Industries AK-21. A very, very interesting rifle, and there's a lot that I want to say about it. We're going to go through it as we always do in the Grand Thumb style, but the best way I could describe this is the AK-21 is to the AKM what the HK416 is to the M4. It's a very interesting step in the evolutionary cycle of the AK platform. It has taken a divergent route compared to the typical genealogy of the AKM, which is what makes it so interesting. Designed, made by a former 275 Ranger, which you know we love them. Let's go ahead, let's test out the AK-21. Is it truly better than what Russia can offer, or have we taken another misstep? Today on Grand Thumb. But before we get into it, we of course have to thank the biggest sponsor of the channel, who is Primary Arms. Listen, we love them. They've been a supporter for a long time, through thick and through thin, and you know what? Not only that, but they make amazing stuff, and they have amazing stuff. Their Compact 1-8 is one of our favorite optics. Their HTX-1 is one of our favorite pistol optics. So go and check out Primary Arms. Give them a little love. Tell them that you love waffles, because compared to pancakes, a waffle allows you to compartmentalize your different condiments on it. That's important, wouldn't you agree, Sawyer?
Yeah, I think so.
Email Primary Arms, say, I love waffles, and then give your reason why. And I don't know. You know, we just don't know what's going to happen. Guys, if you are looking to be a more American, we of course can't recommend Henry Repeating Arms enough. Now, here's the thing. I've shot a lot of guns in my time as a reviewer, as a military guy, and as I've gotten older, as I've shot more, I've just come to love the heritage of a good old lever action. Henry is made in America or not made at all. We love them, so go and give them a bunch of love. In fact, there's something so intense we can't even talk about it here. All we can say is henrythumb.com. That's ominous. And of course, we recommend Dry Fire. Mantis will turn your weapon into a dry fire machine. We cannot recommend them enough. They rock. All my Mantis kits have been stolen because they are so much fun. Listen, it's not going to replace shooting. It's not going to replace all your dry fire, but it can make things a lot of fun and give you some exact feedback. Finally, all ammunition is provided for by AAC. We're shooting their Saber ammunition, which is pretty nice. As you can see right here, it's their 7.62 by 3.9 black tip. Wonderful round. Go and check them out. Now, enough talk. Let's get into the AK-21. So one of the first things we're going to do is test the accuracy potential. So we are using AAC 7.62 by 39, their Saber black tip. Pretty good consistency. We'll also test with your typical Red Army standard. 7.62 by 39 is not a particularly accurate round, but we still need to test it. So we got the magnified Night Force output on there, and let's see how she does. You know what? I had one flyer that was a really good group. Let me shoot. I'm going to shoot one more group here, just to make sure I'm really getting it. Oh, right through the bullseye. That was really satisfying. Nice. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. Okay, I think we have pretty indicative groups of what we're getting. I think the first two, I'm kind of getting used to the longer range shooting with this guy, especially with this optic. It's not the best setup, so let's see what these are and we'll measure them out. Got our groups right here. They're all pretty much the same. I'm guessing about 2 MOA. So let's go ahead and let's check that out. I've seen people getting ridiculously small groups with these, so I'm sure there's better shots than me, but let's see what I'm getting. All right, we're at 1.92 and 1.85 on both these. On this group right here, we're also at 1.98. So this is pretty, this is good. This is what we want to see. And that's even with me throwing around on one of them. So I would say possibly it could be a little bit lower, maybe like 1.2, 1.3 if you're using ammunition that's specifically designed to print really well. Most of it's not. But this is really good. These are really good results for what we want to see from an AK type platform firing 7.62 by 3.9. This is definitely better than many AKMs that you'll see out there. So we definitely do have a fairly accurate rifle right there. Very pleased with the results. Let's continue. So right here we have the AKM. This is a long stroke gas operated weapon fed from a 30 round magazine. AKM is a wonderful gun. Well proven in combat, combat accurate, great. Can't say enough things about it. So this guy is very much so analogous to it in that it uses many of the same fire control, a lot of the same parts. However, much like the 416, like I talked about earlier, it does differ in terms of its operating system, running a short stroke gas operated. Although it does have a long op rod on it, it still is technically by definition a short stroke due to how the piston works. So it's very analogous to the M4 to the 416. Now the question is the 416 has a lot of things that are better than an M4 and some things that are worse. So does this fall into the same category? Well, let's find out. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a couple drills here, see how it runs, and we're gonna talk about it afterwards, break it down full autism style like we always do. That probably one of the coolest things about the AK-21 is the fact that it has a bolt release. Very easy, bolt hold open if you're using the correct followers. So it makes for a very cool gun. So first things first, build drill, 6 rounds in really fast at 7 yards. All right, let's run that one more time. Yeah, it looks good. Nice, clean shots right there. Do one more. There we go. Nice and clean. Okay, looks good. If there's one thing that you should notice about the AK-21, especially compared to the AKM, is how smooth the recoil is. AKM has always been known to have a very good recoil impulse, but let's go ahead and let's compare them directly and see what we get. So they both use the same magazines. However, on the AK-21, it does have a special follower if you want to use the bolt hold open feature. So that's the only way they differ, but it can use normal AK mags. First things first, let's do a little recoil comparison. Okay. Very smooth. I do want to be clear that obviously there is a weight difference. We have a suppressor on this. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, but it's merely a point as reference. The AKM with the slant brake always has a tendency to overdrive, which means that the slant brake actually ends up pushing your gun down too aggressively. So that's an issue you kind of run into with the AKM. We saw it here today when we're shooting. Between the two, the AK-21 is clearly smoother. Let's keep going into it because there's a lot more than just recoil impulse when it comes to a gun. Next up is going to be the Mozambique. So we're going to do 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, and we're going to see how long that takes. You know, usually 7.62 by 39 to the chest, dead, but some people are just built different. Nice. Smooth, felt really good. Don't really have anything bad to say in terms of its shooting performance. It's a very shootable gun, and especially the trigger. The trigger, if you come and take a close look here, is really, you can see we've been shooting the hell out of this thing. Trigger is super nice. At first, when we adjusted it, we were getting some pretty bad trigger slap. So what trigger slap is as that bolt's coming forward, assisting that trigger forward, or due to the springs that it has in there, it's going to push on that trigger too hard, and what's going to happen is it's going to, when your trigger's held to the rear, it's going to force your finger forward, hence trigger slap, and it's not very fun. Your finger will be numb after a little bit. So when we first started shooting it, before we kind of adjusted the gas on it, and it's a very adjustable gas system, we were getting a lot of trigger slap. That seems to have kind of faded away as the gun's broken in. We're at about 2K right now, and I hardly feel any trigger slap at all anymore, but there was definitely a little bit of a break-in period. A little bit odd, but it feels good now. A little bit shooting right here. Super smooth gun. Feels great to shoot. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and let's go on that steel over there. That is really fun. That is super fun. Okay, let's step it back a little bit. Let's get to about 170 and test it out. Okay, at 170, kind of hard to see, but let's give it a shot. Get it, give it a shot. Okay, sorry. All right. Yeah, super easy to shoot. Let's go and let's walk this out a little bit further and see how it does at some combat distances. All right, we're gonna be shooting at 550, which is about the outer range of this gun, and see how we do. You know, it's a larger round, you know, 122 grains, but it really isn't hitting with a whole lot of force, but I've got it dialed now. There's a little bit of wind out there, which makes it somewhat difficult. The round is pretty slow, but I think we just about have this. Okay, that's super fun. Well, whether it be at CQB distances or about the outer range, which should be about 600, but I find with 7.62 by 3.9, probably about 400's a much better bet. At this range, with this particular round and what we're able to do, we are seeing inconsistencies that are typical of that round. They're just not typically loaded for precision. So because of that, there is some difficulty in making the impact. Not to mention, we do have a lot of wind that whips through the canyon right there. And due to the speed of the round, which about 2,300, that gives it a good amount of time for that slug in the air to be operated, to be acted on by the wind. This makes these longer range shots very difficult. It's somewhere that I think the AR-15 with a lighter round is a little bit more effective, although I'll be quick to note that the heavier round certainly is going to hit with more force. It is a really cool sound when it impacts, and it's fun. It's very fun. So we'll take a few more shots, and then we'll go break this down autism style. Super fun. Now that I got it dialed, I know what I'm going for. So pretty neat. Before we break it down autism style, let's talk a little bit about the functionality of the gun and how it differs from your typical AKM. And then it's off to the black screen, boys. So let's take a moment to talk about the reload mechanism on this. It is pretty interesting. So typically an AKM does not have a bolt hold open. There are, of course, magazines that will do it. So like the Yugoslavian magazine will have a bolt hold open, but it will merely hold the bolt to the rear, and then once the magazine is removed, the bolt's of course going to come forward because there's no component in there that's going to keep the bolt locked to the rear. This is in stark contrast to the AK-21, which will hold the bolt to the rear after the magazine is left. With your AK mags, there has to be some modification. So the big one is a follower right here that lifts up and allows you to engage that mechanism. So that's what your mag looks like. So we're going to demonstrate for you how it looks just in nice and slow like. So we fire our last round right here. Of course, we're going to lock back. So at that point, we need to perform a reload. So we're gonna grab our fresh magazine, pop out the old one, insert, and then in contrast to your typical gun, we of course have a bolt release. We have a bolt release right here, or we have the bolt release right here. So once I get that mag in, I can simply hit that, drop that round, and then I can continue to fire. Then of course it locks back on the empty. So it's a very cool, very simple, but very kind of necessary upgrade to the weapon that I think takes this particular gun from, you know, consumer grade territory closer into professional territory. So I'm very happy with the way they've done that. We've talked about the reloads. Let's go ahead, let's break it down black screen style, and let's get autistic. All right, it's time for autism breakdown. We're in the black screen room. We're gonna be talking about the SAK-21. So there is a little bit of confusion there. Kind of clarified it with the makers of the gun, AK-21 or SAK-21, which stands for Stenzel American Kalashnikov 21, the year being the year of our Lord 21. But in any case, we're talking about this very, very, I would say, interesting and very compelling rifle right here. The AK-21 has a lot of features that set it apart. And like I talked about earlier, this is very much so a divergence in the development of the AKM or AK-47, if you're a normie. And it has a lot of very compelling changes to it. We're going to be going in depth on there. But before we do that, we're always going to do what we do, which is our full disclosure. What is our relationship with Stenzel Industries, et cetera, et cetera. So this gun, being a pre-production gun, was sent to us, obviously, to do the review on. Afterwards, this is heading over to Brandon Herrera for him to take a stab at it. I've talked with both the engineers at Stenzel as well as Brandon Herrera and certain other AK gunsmiths who I can't specifically name that have had a lot of good input on this gun. Compared to a lot of rifles that we've previously talked about, guns like this are a little bit more difficult. And they're more difficult because there's far less time on those guns. There's less history behind them. There's less, I know people hate when I say that, but there's less combat proven stories or combat proven track records on these specific guns. So I find that with something like a new production gun like the SAK-21, that there's going to be a grain of salt that you have to take here. You have to understand with these manufacturers making these, I would say, innovative rifles, that these are, in the most case, not produced fully in-house. What that means is that there's a variety of subcontractors that are having to make parts for this gun. So my review is, of course, talking about the gun as it is today. There could be improvements, there could not be improvements, there could be steps backwards depending on how the subcontractors are doing. This is true of many companies. The companies that tend to keep all their manufacturing in-house, of course, are better at controlling the quality control. But American manufacturing being what it is, smaller companies are now constrained. These laws make it more difficult for these small gun makers to come up with these designs and get them made. This isn't like the old days where John Moses Brown could make a machine gun out back. There's a lot of regulations that make this significantly more harder and add a lot of time and money sinks. So with those things out of the way, the first thing we have to talk about is going to be, of course, the cost. This is a very expensive gun. These cost right around $4,000 depending. I'm not sure if the price will go down, go up from the point of this review. And a lot of people will say, well, that's ridiculous. I understand, but again, economy of scale. You go to a CNC shop and you say, I need 500 rails made. They're gonna laugh their heads off because that means they have to shut down production, put several machines on the work, and it's just time loss, especially for tuning up, tooling up, and figuring out how the machines are gonna make all these different components. Small scale manufacturing sucks. When we got the tuning fork made on our Mandalorian rifle, it was like 800 bucks. It's ridiculous. Understand that there are just constraints for these small manufacturers. We'll take that into consideration, though ultimately we'll be reviewing this from a shooter's perspective and talking about what we like and what we don't like about it. So to start off with, what's very interesting about the SAK-21 is when we take a look at the AKM is very much so an upside down Garand. That's the best way to kind of describe it. A lot of design principles were taken from that, and it is a long stroke gas piston system. Very, very reliable, adds weight to the bolt, works incredibly well, and obviously is a very proven design. The SAK actually uses a indirect short stroke gas system. I would compare it very closely to the SCAR L and the SCAR H in terms of how it works. So obviously you have the short stroke piston right here, and that is an adjustable gas regulator. And moving back to the bolts, you'll see that it looks different from an AK, but you can see we have that long op rod, which at first led me to believe that this was a long stroke gas piston until they set me straight. Much like the SCAR has that op rod as well, which adds weight to the bolt, which is a different way of tuning the weapon along with springs and gas pressure to make sure that it's running well. The reason that they went with the short stroke design was that in theory, and somewhat in practice, a short stroke works really well with a suppressor. There's a lot more of that gas bleed off up front and further away from the action, which when suppressed, you know, those hot carbon gases and stuff are going back to the receiver. This helps ameliorate some of those issues and can make it slightly more reliable compared to a long stroke. Now, we're not talking in huge terms here. Both long stroke and short stroke are very reliable with suppressors. It's just all about optimization, especially for a very proven design. Beyond that, it runs off of AK mags. Now, in the case of the mags that we're using, you can have a follower on here that will allow the weapon to work as it should. Now, it works with normal AK mags, your normal steel mags will work, that will all work. A very cool feature on the SAK-21 is going to be its bolt hold open feature like we talked about. Now, when we load in a fresh mag, pop the old mag out, fresh mag in, we of course, like we talked about, release here or release here. But if we have an empty mag, you can see it's going to get caught on that lip, on that follower to let you know, hey, you have an empty mag in there, figure your stuff out. On a full mag, that bolt will just drop. Those are some of the big picture features that we have on the SAK-21, and that is barely touching the surface. So let's delve into this gun. Let's talk about it. Let's define and describe and review the SAK-21. So start off with, obviously we've replaced the muzzle device. The muzzle device that it comes with, I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a fan of really gaudy features, and at first, the colors on the SAK-12 really kind of turned me off. I know it's that kind of honey badger look to it, which is cool. However, I prefer a more militarized style and look to my guns because I'm autistic and I love LARPing. The colors have kind of grown on me, especially as the gun's gotten dirty. Now, we replaced it with an RD muzzle device because we love these suppressors right here. These suppressors are, of course, made primarily for machine guns. The first time I got hands-on with one of these was on a 240, so I figured what better to run on this just heavy-duty, overbuilt gun than a heavy-duty, overbuilt suppressor. This suppressor is a flow-through design, so we didn't have to do as much adjustment on the gas system as we typically need to. But we also ran it with a traditional baffle design, and it also ran A-OK, no problem, so long as you're adjusting the gas system to work with the ammunition that you're using and with the suppressor that you are using. Moving back to a couple things here, let's talk about a lot of the components. So what really sets them apart from many other manufacturers is the use of very good and very expensive materials. This isn't a bad thing per se, but when I take a look at the SAK-21, the thing that I can say the most is that it is overbuilt. It is over-engineered. It is meant to be a tank and to survive a whole lot of abuse and damage, and I love that feature about it. I think that there's a lot of good thought process behind the design of the gun. Now, the guy who designed the gun was actually a 275 Ranger. Obviously, John being on the channel, we're huge fans of Rangers. We love them. He came up with this idea in a team room. He said, what if I made just a better AK, Americanize it, maybe change up the gas system, give it all the features to modernize this rifle. At this point, Russia hasn't even done yet. The AK-12, in my opinion, was not a very good rifle, was not a very good upgrade to the platform. I think this might be a little bit better, but that's the small side. Let's move down here. Now, the barrel is tapered. So your muzzle devices that are typically running off 90-degree shoulders are not going to work. You need to use an adapter. We're using a Q adapter right here on ours to adapt to a 90-degree shoulder. Annoying for me, most of my muzzle devices are using a 90-degree shoulder. I understand why and that it's better. That being said, we have the adapter, works no problem, no complaints really. That is going to be design feature choice. The barrel itself is 4150 nitrided. Now, 4150 CMD is your typical military barrel steel used on M4s, etc., etc. I would say this is the bare minimum for what should be used. I was definitely kind of hoping for a cold hammer forged barrel. I understand that they're primarily used in machine guns and 416s, etc., etc., but I become a big fan of that very dense steel that you get from cold hammer forging to allow the barrel to last a very long time. 4150, a very good material. A lot of people are not fans of nitriding. I personally am. I like it. As far as the twist rate, it is 1 turn every 10 inches on this gun. Very typical for the pattern. and it all works very well. In shooting it, you can see that we print really well with it. I've heard of people getting 1 MOA or less. We don't hand load our 7.62 by 39 ammo. We're not getting that. That being said, I think with good ammo, more so than what we are using, like Hornady and stuff, you could definitely get about 1.3, 1.5. We're getting closer to 1.8 to 1.9. That's still extremely good performance with an AK. And I have really no qualms with 4150. Given the price, I am going to nitpick on the barrel steel itself. Maybe upgrade to cold hammer forging in the near future. I think that would be very cool for everyone. Now, when we're talking about the barrel is 12.5 inches. This is the operator variant. There is a commando variant. Very cool naming, right? And the commando variant is like an 8 and change barrel. When it comes to 7.60 by 39, what's really cool about it is that it really doesn't lose a whole lot of velocity from 16 down to 12. So a 12.5 barrel on a 7.60 by 39, in my opinion, makes the most sense as a barrel length for 7.62 by 39. That was very smart of them to use that barrel length. Big fan of that. Now, from there, let's move over to the gas system. I think they did some really cool things with the gas system. Let's get into it. So on our gas regulator, one, it's got that golden color, which means it's obviously better. So it is 17-4 stainless steel. 17-4 stainless steel is a very big deal because, that rhymes, it is extremely resistant to corrosion, extremely well made, extremely good steel. The problem is, it's expensive. This adds to the price. That being said, I'm very happy that they decided to go with a more expensive material to make this thing absolutely bomb-proof. Now, the gas regulator is, of course, adjustable. You have your typical, and then you can, of course, adjust it to an adverse / a subsonic position. Now, on this particular guy right here, we actually haven't adjusted it since we got it initially adjusted, but let's see. Actually, that moves really easy. That's nice. That being said, any piston, any type of adjustable piston system can freeze up. Carbon locking is definitely a thing. Make sure you're cleaning these out periodically. I do about every 1,000 or 2,000 rounds on these guys, and you'll be absolutely fine. Just like many others, aftermarket things with SCAR, 416, etc., it is going to be a possible issue that you can run into. Now, what makes the gas regulator even more compelling is you see this little set screw right here. This actually is going to increase or decrease the amount of gas coming in. So you can do further fine tuning beyond what they gave to you. This makes for a rifle that you can tune to precisely what you need. This is going to, of course, increase parts longevity, etc. With the advent of a lot of flow-through suppressors, a lot of these older gas settings for suppressors aren't just working because the suppressors are decreasing the back pressure so much. So being able to fine tune it based on the suppressor that you have, I think is very cool. Now, it should be noted, of course, being at 2,500 rounds, we are a sample size of 1 with a sample size of 1 rifle, so things can change. That being said, the things I would worry about would be the set screw freezing in place due to carbon lock, etc. So that's something that I can't really account for. My gut opinion says that it's something you should probably clean with the gas regulator every 1,000 to 2,000 rounds to make sure that it's running freely. And in fact, in their manual, which is at this point still in the early phase, well, towards the latter phases of development, they do note that you should keep the gas system somewhat clean. This is in contrast to like your typical AKM, where there really isn't a whole lot that you need to do to it, but adding adjustability just changes things, but I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a step in the right direction. Now, the handguard is 6061 extruded aluminum. It is all anodized, so it is very, very strong. 6061, very typical of what you see with handguard. Aluminum, it's used because it's lightweight and strong enough depending on the thickness. You can see having a bottom and top Picatinny rail makes for this being extremely strong. I would equate it just like a 416. It kind of feels the same way with like how kind of oblong it is. It almost feels like the SMR rail from the HK 416. It's not a bad thing. I'm like, man, I have decent sized man hands and it works perfectly for me. I found that with some of the really small handguards that it's like, it's just like you're like touching fingers on the other side of it. So I do like the thickness with 3Cs that you have with this particular handguard. Now, it should be noted that any of the steel components that they do have on this, they are DLC coated, diamond-like coating. That's an extremely expensive, but extremely durable coating. Moving back to our guy right here, you can see the upper and lower receivers. You can see this thing has seen a whole lot of rounds. We haven't cleaned it once because I really wanted to kind of see how it would do. But let's talk a little bit about these components. If you're a machinist, looking at these, you can probably already tell they're expensive to manufacture because it's a lot. So both the upper and the lower are made from 7075 billet aluminum. wonderful. Expensive to machine, of course, expensive to manufacture, but gives you a very strong end result, which is what we have right here. Now, a couple things to note. Right here, we have 2 screws. I know some people are very critical of screws. Most guns have screws nowadays, so I'm not gonna be like screw build because I really don't think it is. But these allow you to change out the barrel to calibers. So they have a lot of caliber conversion kits that they're planning to bring to the market with this guy. They're not out yet, so don't hold me to that. But as of right now, they have every plan in the world to make different caliber conversion kits for these particular AKs, which is cool. Now, with all these very nice components, the thing that we are running into is weight. It is a heavy gun. Without a magazine in it, we're about 8 pounds plus some change, compared to like an AKM at 7.8, or compared to an AK-74 at 6.8, or an M4 around the 6-pound mark. We do have a heavy gun right here. This, of course, reduces recoil, but it should be noted that, man, it is heavy for what it is. I'm going to count that against it only because many modern designs have figured out ways to lighten things up. I understand being a small new company, things will get better over time. Being the Gen 1, I am very happy with it. Now, moving back to the bolt right here, it is a very interesting kind of design overall. So you can see we have a continuous rail with the hinge right here, just like we have on a typical kind of AK build, but it's a very sturdy mounting platform. So very Zenitco-like, perhaps a little bit better due to the fact that they got to design this from the ground up to be a good optics mounting platform. That's something that's plagued the AKs for a long time, which is how do you mount optics well so they return to zero after you're done cleaning them. There's a lot of different options. I think what they've designed right here is very good. And moving down to the bolt right here, you can see it's definitely looks like the prototype AK-12s back when they made those, but we have a good grip on the charging handle right there. And moving back, before we get into the controls, let's talk a little bit about the internals on this particular guy, because I do think that they're quite compelling. Right here, we have this takedown, much like an AK. We're gonna press that in. That's gonna set in place to make it easier to pop off the hinge dust cover. Hinge dust cover is off. This thing's really dirty, so I'm about to get really dirty, but that's life. From here, just like a normal AK, you're gonna pop out that recoil spring. You can see it right there. And put that unceremoniously on the ground. And then what we can do is we can pull that bolt all the way to the back, break it out just like your typical AK. And this is where it begins to diverge a little bit from an AK. So we have a very AK-like bolt in terms of the lockup. But if we rotate that guy and pull it out, you can see that the firing pin is actually fixed to the bolt carrier. A lot of questions on why did they do that? Well, the reason is that it can help prevent slam fire, unwanted discharges. This is one of the reasons why much of the 7.62 by 39 and 545 ammunition has a hard primer. That firing pin being within the bolt itself, especially if it's not spring loaded or something like that, as it comes forward, that can potentially cause a slam fire in certain conditions. This isn't really a problem so long as you're using the correct ammunition, but it should be noted. Now, being that we're in America, not as many hard primers, what they did to solve this problem was they put that into the bolt carrier group. In this way, the firing pin cannot come into contact with the primer until the whole system is fully seated forward. This is going to prevent any type of out of battery detonations and is a wonderful safety feature. Obviously, we've had no problems, and obviously beyond that, we've had no problems with our AKs. This is simply a redundant safety feature, much like something HK would do. HK often over engineers or stuff for very unlikely scenarios. I would say this kind of meets that criteria and that definition. Nonetheless, I am happy that they did it. I think it is a step in the right direction. I should note too that I do like the look of the kind of taller dust cover that we have on the SAK-21. I think it's attractive. I think this is overall a very attractive design. Now the guide rod on the spring right here is actually a little bit shorter than what you'd see on an AK. So at first it could be a little tricky for my guys who are used to, you know, your typical AK recoil guide springs, but not that bad. Once it's in place, it's locked in that takedown position. Simply rack it, and that's going to pop it back into place. The gun is now secure, and you're good to go. So pop our magazine back in there, and let's continue talking about the controls. The controls are very, very interesting. So first off, we have your typical magazine release on the AK. No problem there, no qualms there. It is a very proven design. But what's even better is if we look on the inside of the magazine wall right here, you can see that it's beveled. You know, it's always been like the mark of a good AK operator where they can flawlessly perform a reload. But on this, it makes it really easy. Those lips guide it right into place and your magazine just gets right where it needs to go. It makes for lightning fast reloads, and especially with the bolt hold open feature, whether it be with your firing hand, whether it be traditionally on the American flag right here. That is a quick reload on the AK, and definitely, what's the word? It simplifies the manual of arms on the typical AK platform that you'd usually be familiar with. I'm a big fan of that. Now, moving on to the trigger. So the trigger is very, very good, and we'll talk about a few issues that we did have with the trigger. So first off, safety is very odd. It is a crossbolt safety, much like you'd see on a SAW or an M240. I guess they're big fans of that. I would much prefer something more normal, just like a typical fire selector, but they're different. It's interesting. It's a little odd training wise, because typically what I do is I bump my knuckle into it to pop it off safe. So we're on safe right here, white dots. So I'm bringing the gun up. I kind of rock my knuckle into it to put it back on safe. Just use my thumb right there. A little bit odd, but let's go ahead and let's try that trigger out. This trigger is wide, it is flat, and it is very light. So feeling into it, you have a little bit of play and you have it let off at maybe 3 pounds. That is a fast trigger. Okay, let's check the reset. Off the reset, maybe 2 millimeters and like a 2.5 pound pull from there. It is a nice trigger. Now, that being said, very oddly, we had some issues with the trigger at the very beginning. Let's talk about that. Dude, I do it every time. I have all that gun grease in my hair and then I smooth my hair back. Gun grease in the hair, man. So when we were first shooting this, we were getting a lot of trigger slap. There are certain guns that exhibit trigger slap. The most famous one I could think of would be like a Galil 308 or something like that. It's solved with other things, but we had some pretty bad trigger slap on this guy. So what's happening is, as that bolt's coming forward, that trigger's getting forced forward against your trigger finger that's pinned. So it kind of forces your finger forward. Kind of numbs up your finger. It's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable, it's not really fun. When I talked to them about that, they said to mess with the gas settings a little bit, but they thought it was perhaps over gas. In the case of our gun, it was not over gassed. It was cycling perfectly fine, in my opinion. I messed with it a little bit. The trigger slap got a little bit better, but oddly enough, after about 600-700 rounds, it just kind of went away. I thought maybe I was getting used to it. Me, John, Sawyer all shot it, as well as other friends, and the trigger slap issue kind of solved itself. That's frustrating for me because I kind of wanted like a good data point on that. Why did it go away? I looked at the springs, perhaps they wore in. It's a brand new build. It's all conjecture on my account. These are still fairly rare out in the public space, and because of that, I don't have a lot of good data on it. So that's something that I'd like to see from other people, noting if their trigger slap kind of alleviates itself, if it solves itself, or if it's an issue with further builds. I wish I could comment more on this. Again, there's very few of these out in the world right now, so that's one issue that I can't really speak to that much. Grip is wonderful. We have a little bit of goon tape around there because also obviously, you know, we got to be cool. Actually, it's not goon tape. This is just hockey tape. Same thing. Nothing against goon tape. They're cool dudes. Moving to the back here. One other issue that I ran into, so we have 1913 rail back here to attach a 1913 stock, the stock. Ugh. But on the 1913 piece itself, it's secured with a hex screw. And in our case, after about 2,000 rounds, that hex screw started backing out a little bit. So we started to get some wobble in the hinge right there, which is of course not fun when you're shooting it because your entire stock is wobbling a little bit. So I actually put a little bit of blue Loctite on there and resealed it, and then it was fine after that. But again, you know, with kind of a critical piece right there, that was a little bit annoying, especially on the build costs and everything, but was easily solvable on my end. Just something to look out for. I didn't see any thread locker on it when I pulled it out. I'm not sure if that was an oversight on their part or if they were supposed to put thread locker on it. In any case, I would thread lock it just on that little piece right back there. I've never had any problems with any of the other screws. No loosening or anything like that. I did have them marked. I'm sorry guys, I took it off. I was annoyed when we were filming. So autism, it's really hard. It's tough, guys. It's tough out there. Moving back to the stock, these little minimalist stocks, they just have a tendency to kind of unlock very easily, no matter which one I have. So it just kind of kept folding on me. That's not this gun's fault. That's the stock's fault. But choose whatever stock you want. It does come with a JMac brace, and those are wonderful. The grip is from Meridian, also a great AK builder. Overall, we have a lot of good pieces, a lot of very good machining, a lot of good design choices. It just kind of comes together to make for a very robust gun, albeit a gun that is very expensive. So this is where it becomes tough because, like, personally, I think this is a really good design. I think it's a really good step for AKs, but you know, due to economy of scale, this is a very expensive weapon. It's hard for me to tell people to buy a gun that costs 4K because I think 4K is really kind of getting out of hand as far as the cost of a gun. On the flip side, I understand why it costs 4K. Small shop, having to machine a bunch of parts, you know, with different chops and stuff, it just costs a lot. I guess what I'll say about it is this. This is a great step in the evolution of the AKM, of the AK series of rifles. This American Kalashnikov right here is incredible. I think it's a very good design. I think if this came in at closer to 3, this would be a knockout, you know? If it came in at closer to 2, this would be a no-brainer. This kind of stuff can only happen as their company grows in size. So if you have every gun you already want and you want to really upgrade and try this guy out, 100%. If you're buying your first gun or buying your second gun, this isn't what I would recommend. 4K, you can buy damn near 3 Super Duties plus optics, and those are incredible rifles. If you want a very good build, a very good design that's bifurcating from the family tree of the AKM, and I would guess will end up being quite popular, I think you can't go wrong with the SAK-21. Final notes on this are going to be magazines. So obviously right here, we are primarily using the magazines that were provided to us from X-Tech. These have worked really well for me. The steel mags worked really well. Oddly enough, my Magpul mags are having tons of trouble in this. They're just factory followers, and the whole follower was tilting and like popping out bullets. It was super frustrating. I ended up testing that in another AK. It happened with that AK as well, so it's not just this AK. Those mags are just giving me trouble. Bulgarians, oddly enough, had the same problem on both guns, so apparently I got a bad batch of both Magpuls and Bulgarian mags. All the other mags have been fine on it. You know, that's gonna be something where I need more data. I can only tell you what happened with the AKs that I have, but more data would be good. So finally, that brings us down to the SAK-21. Very cool design, very expensive, but here's the thing. You can have this and train with it and be incredible. But if you don't train, you're still gonna die. So get out there, get training, guys. Get good with what you have. I'm gonna be terrified of a guy just running a bone stock AKM and shooting at me versus a guy with all this, all the doodads, but he can't, you know, run more than 100 feet without his heart giving out on him. Train, get good. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget the Patreon, all the worst content we have put up there for your perusal. Final thing for you guys is gonna be a little bit of dad advice. A little bit of dad advice for today is going to be, guns are cool, materials are cool, but you know what's even cooler? Having a house. Save up, buy a house, because land's not going anywhere. They're not making more of it unless you're in Hawaii, and volcanoes are making more. But even then, the government's going to take it. Get yourself some land, get yourself a house. Make sure that you can take care of your family. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you guys. And nothing else. We're done. We're done.